Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you all again. Got a story for you today that is called The Smartest Giant in Town. And it's one of our classic authors. We've read lots of stories by her. It's a story by Julia Donaldson and illustrated by Axel Scheffer, who's done lots of stories that we've read before. So I'm going to turn over and read the blurb first of all, and then we'll get started. It says, George wished he wasn't the scruffiest giant in town. One day when he sees a new shop selling giant-sized clothes, he decides it's time for a new look. No wonder what that look will be. So get yourselves into a comfy position and then I'll start. George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town. He always wore the same pair of old brown sandals and the same old patched up gown. I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town, he said sadly. He does look quite sad there. He's a very tall giant. But one day, George noticed a new shop. It was full of smart clothes. So, he bought a smart shirt, a smart pair of trousers, a smart belt, a smart stripy tie, some smart socks with diamonds up the sides, and a pair of smart shiny shoes. Now I'm the smartest giant in town, he said proudly. George left his old clothes behind in the shop. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the pavement stood a giraffe who was sniffing sadly. What's the matter? Asked George. It's my neck, said the giraffe. It's so very long and very cold. I wish I had a nice long warm scarf. Cheer up, said George, and he took off his stripy tie. It didn't match my socks anyway, he said, as he wound it round and round the giraffe's neck. It made a wonderful scarf. Oh, thank you, said the giraffe. As George strode towards home, he sang to himself, my tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town. There's the giraffe with his now, got his scarf on. George came to a river. On a boat stood a goat who was bleating loudly. What's the matter? Asked George. It's my sail, said the goat. It blew away in a storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat. Cheer up, said George, and he took off his new white shirt. It kept coming untucked anyway, he said, and he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. Oh, thank you, said the goat. George strode on, singing to himself, my tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat, and a sail for a goat. But look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a tiny ruined house. Beside the house stood a white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squeaking. What's the matter? Asked George. Oh, it's our house, squeaked the mother mouse. It burnt down and now we have nowhere to live. I wish we had a nice new house. I wonder what he's going to use to make them a new house. Cheer up, said George, and he took off one of his shiny shoes. It was giving me blisters anyway, he said. As the mouse and her baby scrambled inside, the shoe made a perfect home for them. Oh, thank you, they squeaked. George had to bop along the road and now, but he didn't mind. He hopped and he sang to himself, my tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat, as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse, but look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a campsite. Beside a tent stood a fox who was crying. What's the matter? Asked George. It's my sleeping bag, said the fox. I dropped it in a puddle. Oh, I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag. Cheer up, said George, and he took off one of his socks with his diamonds up the side. It was tickling my shoes anyway, he said. As the fox snuggled into it, it made a very fine sleeping bag. Oh, thank you, said the fox. George hopped on, singing to himself. My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a warm fox. But look me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a big squelchy bog. Beside the bog stood a dog who was howling. What's the matter? Asked George. It's this bog, said the dog. I need to get across, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a safe, dry patch. Cheer up, said George as he took off his smart new belt. It was squashing my tummy anyway, he said, as he laid it down over the bog. It made an excellent path. Oh, thank you, said the dog. The wind started to blow, but George didn't mind. He hopped on, singing to himself. My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. My belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. But what do you think is going to happen? My trousers are starting to fall down. I'm the coldest giant in town. Suddenly, George felt sad and shivery and not all that smart. He stood on one foot and thought, oh, I'll have to go back to the shop and buy some more clothes, he decided. He turned round and he hopped all the way back to the shop. But when he got there, it was closed. Oh no, cried George. He sank down onto the doorstep and a tear ran down his nose. He felt as sad as all the animals he had met along his way. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a bag with something familiar poking out of the top. George took a closer look. Oh, my gown, he yelled, my dear old gown and sandals. George put them on. They felt wonderfully comfortable. Oh, I'm the cosiest giant in town, he cried, and he danced back home all the way along the road. Outside his front door stood all the animals that he had helped. They were carrying an enormous present. Come on, George, they said. Open it. George untied the ribbon. Inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. Look inside the card, George, said the animals. George put the crown on his head and he opened up the card. Inside it said, you gave your scarf to a cold giraffe, your shirt on a boat as a sail for a goat. Your shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of your socks is a bed for a fox. Your belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. So here is a very fine crown to go with the sandals and gown of the kindest giant in town. The end. Oh, so because he helped all the animals along the way, they wanted to thank him. And they said, you're the kindest giant in town. And I think I would agree with that too. Definitely a kind giant for helping all those animals. How lovely. So that story today was The Smartest Giant in Town, written by Julia Donaldson. Hope you enjoyed that story and you can join us again next time. Bye everybody.